Welcome to another episode, another special episode of The Diplomats. Here with a man I've been waiting to talk to for at least a year, Captain Meme, who played Turkey in the Season 4 Online Diplomacy Championships, being very critical of your humble narrator during Season 2, but I should say rightly so. But I get to return the favor here today, although I won't be nearly as harsh as he was on me. This podcast is absent Humble the Heat today, but never forget it's brought to you by diplomacybriefing.com. Captain Meme, thank you for joining us. We greatly appreciate you being here. How are you doing tonight?
Howdy, I'm doing good, and it's good to be on the podcast. I've been listening to pretty much every episode and enjoying them all a lot. And
you don't have a life. I'm sorry that this is all you can do. Apparently, listen to us our bad podcast.
I'm a university student, so I can get away with not having a life for the moment.
Well, okay, that's true. Look, let me ask you this: you've commented on diplomacy before. Your comments are all very good, but take me back into when you, a young lad, was apparently even younger and got into diplomacy. What attracted you to the game, and when did you get started?
Yeah, I got started about 10 years ago now. I think it was 10 years ago when my maths teacher started a board game club and decided that diplomacy should be a game that we try, and it just hooked me. And I just went, okay, I need more of this. Looked online for it and ended up getting really into it, and I still am.
So have you, how often or how long have you been playing, I guess, through the Nexus championships?
This was my first Nexus season. I've been following the Nexus since season 2, as you'll know, because I commented on commentated on your finals.
You said I could do better than those dumbasses. Let me get in there, and you did.
Well, I mean, I didn't quite make it in the final stages, and I only just managed to qualify, which would have been embarrassing if I hadn't. But yeah, I gave it my all, and that was all I could give.
How? Well, you know, you're still alive. I'm not sure you gave it your all. I mean, you didn't sacrifice yourself or anything. But
that's true.
Describe your style as a diplomacy player, if you have one. Do you have one?
I do. I would say it's a lot. It's kind of like a light version of Umble's whole Puppet Master thing. I like being in control of as many people as possible, but I do that from a more in a less direct manner, I guess. I'm extremely paranoid. Like always. So I always think, okay, this person is probably not going to do what I tell them to, but I try and do everything I can to make sure that each other person around me is doing it. Well, I know exactly what they're going to do. And I try and stay in everyone's good books so that I have that opportunity to keep on pressing the advantage as you go forward in the game. And it worked out pretty well.
So it seems like, which is diplomacy 101, but 101, but you build trust. It seems like that's what you try to do. Build trust and slowly build an advantage.
Oh, for sure. If I had the chance in this game, I would probably have gone with the same strategy that France and Germany did of sticking together for as long as possible with one ally, because when you build that amount of trust, you can sweep the board. And as long as you are a paranoid player like I am, you don't tend to leave yourself open when you're doing that so much. So I don't think I would have had the same downside that Germany ended up having in this game. But
we will get to that. I've just spent a long time with Babo, so I have his perspective, and it's fresh in my mind. So in this game, you drew Turkey. Tell me what you think about the board power of Turkey in the game of diplomacy. Do you like it? Are you disappointed by getting Turkey? I know a lot of top players don't like it, but Turkey has a lot of good results in the game. So Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, it's definitely a strong power. It's my least favorite power to play just because I play a lot better in positions where I'm not doing well, I've found, which is amusing. And with Turkey, you're not often fighting for your life, right? If you're like pushed to that extreme, you put everything you've got into it and you start doing the sort of things that you'll see in the very late stages of the game from me. That sort of stuff is stuff I would do right from the beginning if I was, say, Austria. So I love playing Austria because it tests me and it makes me perform, like put on my best performance. As Turkey, I don't really feel that kick until much, much later. It's just a little bit boring being sat in the corner. But it's a strong...
It's a strong power, obviously, and won season 3 of the Nexus finals. It's all about getting to 6, I think, for Turkey. It's very hard to stop after that.
Yeah, I mean, that was my initial plan in the game, was just to try and consolidate that position and, hope that once I had that consolidated position, it would just be enough to push me over the line later on. And yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later, I guess.
I'm sure we will. But tell us about your impressions of the other players as you were engaged in initial negotiations. I assume concentrating on Russia, Austria, and Italy, the immediate concerns for Turkey.
Yeah. So right off the bat, my favorite player to talk to was Austria. He has a very friendly negotiating style, and it really vibed with me. I was very happy about it, though. And like initially, I really wanted to work with him based on that. Russia, he was very strategic, very analytical. He wouldn't give you very much in the way of conversation, which is fine, but it turned me off a little bit initially. And Italy...
I'm thinking Italy was the opposite. He gave you a lot in terms of conversation.
Kind of. He did, and then he went into initially with Italy, I was pretty happy with it because we were talking and sort of connecting, and I was happy with that. I mean, that's the way to get into my heart in this game when you start out, is to just chat. Because that really works with me. But then Italy sort of turned into a used car salesman almost. He would send... There was just something about most of his messages that sounded really insincere, and I can't exactly put my finger on what. It certainly didn't help that he was like sending walls that could have just been 2 lines long and said exactly the same thing. I think it's something that would really work with some people, but it just didn't really work with me.
Well, sure, but in the early stages, when if you can build something with Italy as Turkey, that's great, because usually the IT is not a successful strategy for Italy by 1903 or 4. So I can see why you'd want to do that. All right, so you opened up conventionally for Turkey. Obviously, your only other real option was an anti-Russian attack. I think it was very sensible. Tell me your views of what else you saw going on here.
Okay, well, I did actually consider opening anti-Russian since I wanted to ally with Austria off the bat. That was my first thoughts. And Italy was also requesting that I do that and saying that he would maybe be willing to open anti-Austrian if I agreed to it. And that was something I thought, well, I mean, Austria-Italy fighting is always good for Turkey, so maybe if I can cause that, it'll be good for me. But then I heard about this this bounce in Venice that the Austrian was forcing on Italy, or so Italy was saying, and so Italy definitely wouldn't be able to attack Austria off the bat. And once that was there, it's like, no, I'm not going for Russia in 1901. I need to keep my options open just in case of an Austria-Italy alliance here. Other things, there's not a huge amount to talk about aside from everyone was shouting Western Triple the moment they saw these French moves.
Sure, hard not to disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean that would
But
have been great for
that's
me.
not, yeah, that's what I was about to say. That's a good sign for you, right? Like, let's tie up Italy and give me space to grow.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was just going around saying, "Oh yeah, that's definitely a Western Triple. You guys should turn around and like go after him. Let me just
Yeah.
take the Balkans." Eh?
All right. So now uh, you support Italy into Greece
Yes, I do.
in fall 1901. Greece is always a point of contention, but you do see France moving now fully on towards Italy. Of course, we didn't know that Mid-Atlantic for sure would move to the Western Med. Tell me your thought process here about assisting Italy, getting attacked by, I guess you thought your buddy Austria. What's going on now?
Yeah, so a lot of things happen this phase. I was really not a fan of Italy getting Greece. I thought that would probably lead to an Austria-Italy alliance, and even if it didn't, there was always going to be the option of Italy attacking me, and I didn't want that on the table. As long as Greece was open, I was safe.
Right.
Because I trusted Russia. He was really all in on the juggernaut here. Even though initially I wanted to move against him, I was fairly certain I could trust his word that he wasn't coming after me. So I also didn't know about the French move going to Western Med in advance. No one did, as far as I was aware. So I didn't know all this pressure would be on Italy. The Austrian move cutting Bulgaria was maybe a result of bad diplomacy on my part. Because the first thing I wanted to do was, okay, I want to work with Austria. What's the best way to work with Austria? Well, it's for him to support me up to Romania, right? Then
or the opposite, but yeah, sure, correct.
well,
Yeah,
if I support him into Romania from here, then he loses. He doesn't get Serbia, so it doesn't
that's
really give
true.
us anything.
Right.
I knew that Sevastopol was going to Black Sea, so I knew that if Austria would support Bulgaria to Romania, we'd have a really strong position. I would already be in Romania, and I'd get the two builds. But I didn't initially ask him to do that off the bat. I asked him if I could have Greece, because I was really hoping that what he would say was, I'm not too comfortable with that. How about you go to Romania instead and I'll support you there? And then it's like his idea, so he's more likely to go with it.
Right. You're leading him down the primrose path, but how did he respond to it?
His response was, okay, I really don't like the idea of you being in Greece. And then it sort of just stopped. And then I heard from Russia, hey, Austria is telling me you're going to Romania. Like, I haven't even mentioned Romania yet. What? So at that moment, I was just like, I mean, Austria clearly isn't someone who thinks the Austria-Turkey alliance is worth going for here. I'm going to have to find a different option. And that was at the same point as Italy was just repeatedly bombarding me with messages saying, please help me to Greece, please help me to Greece, please help me to Greece. So eventually I conceded on that point and gave him that support. And it turned out to be a very good thing for me, although I didn't like it at the time at all.
No, you set him up beautifully. Or I think he may have said in his podcast, he set himself up beautifully. We'll get to
he
that.
Absolutely did. Yeah.
So you build in Smyrna, which would be pretty common. Nothing out of the ordinary there. And when we get to spring 1902, here we go. You get Italy into Serbia from Bulgaria.
Yep.
Russia takes Galicia. You move to Aegean. Tell me how the move to Serbia, getting Italy to go there, came about.
Okay, so Italy was always in favor of going to Serbia. It was his idea from the outset. I would have probably proposed it if he hadn't, but like
That's
was
what
really
he told
enthused.
me. He said that it was part of his plan.
Yep. And like obviously it didn't work out for him so well. I think he was more confident about me continuing to work with him than he should have been. um, but
I think he felt like he had options with Russia and you, and that
for
would have
sure.
given him more flexibility.
So
In fairness, I think that's what he was. I think he thought he could work with both.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that he came off as very used car salesman was just also information I was getting from other players, and that was most importantly Russia. We were always cross-referencing what Italy was saying with one another, and Italy had been very insistent to me off the bat, never share anything I'm telling you with anyone. And that sort of rung alarm bells to me and said, okay, well, clearly he's telling you, see, he's telling Russia something different. He's telling Austria something different. I mean, he probably would be anyway, but that just told me, okay, always tell other people what Italy is saying and cross-reference and make sure that he's not backstabbing you. And me and Russia did that, and we found out, okay, Italy is setting us up to be going against each other at some point. Let's just lock in our alliance now, say that we're going to kill him later, and move forward. And neither of us trusted him, so it was a pretty good basis for our alliance to start off.
True, but let me ask you this. On the other hand, when you see France doing what France is doing, and Turkey's growth path with a juggernaut with Russia is usually through the Mediterranean, with Russia going north. This can't be, I mean, you want France and Italy to be tied up a little bit, but this cannot be that welcome of a development.
Yeah, I wasn't too happy about the French units, like the amount of French commitment. I was quite happy that Italy was getting distracted from my front.
Right.
But certainly as the moves continued and France started committing more and more, it got more annoying. But I didn't think I needed to get all the way to Tunis to win. I felt like as part of a juggernaut, I could probably just get to the Italian peninsula and take it. Especially since when you're in a juggernaut and Austria and Italy are fighting like this, Russia is the person who's going to get all the backlash from the other powers because they're very close to his home supply centers in the north, and they can launch an attack pretty easily that he'll have problems defending, and no one can attack me.
So here we go in the fall 1902. Now, this isn't obviously a stab, but I assume Italy knew you were moving to Greece.
Yes, he tried very, very hard to talk me out of that. He tried to say, I need the extra unit against France. You know, it's in your best interest to leave me Greece. Just like self-bounce there and we'll keep going. And I was just, no, I'm not. I'm not doing that. I'm going to Greece. And he did his thing of continuously sending messages and giving more and more points, but this was one thing I really wasn't willing to compromise on. And I think if I had compromised on
it... You did give him Serbia. I mean, he owed you something.
Yeah, basically. I think probably this was his plan to try and make sure that I didn't take Greece here. And I think if I hadn't taken Greece here, I may have been in a huge amount of trouble later on. Just because of how strong Italy would have gotten, and he was clearly not on my side at this point. So I went to Greece.
And it's obviously looking really good right now with you and Russia against Austria. I know Italy's there in Serbia, but things are set up really well for you at this point.
Yeah. And a lot of it isn't actually my doing. It's just the fact that, like, France decided by himself to attack Italy. Italy decided that he wanted to be at constant war with Austria. Italy decided that he wanted to go to Serbia. Stuff like this.
Russia was interested in Austria.
Yep. Yeah. And I was just, like, riding the wave as it was coming. I wasn't doing a huge amount to cause all this because I didn't really need to. It was all happening without my input.
Yeah, no, that's a good position to be in. I think if you remember, I kept saying, look at Turkey. Keep looking at Turkey. This is looking great for Turkey. You build the fleet. I think there was a debate Umbel really wanted, I think, an army Khan to enforce your will in the Balkans, but I'm guessing you're about to tell me to deceive Italy and to continue deception on a juggernaut. You needed to build that fleet.
Yeah, both to deceive Italy and because I don't think Russia would have been as comfortable with another army build. I really wanted to just keep the Juggernaut rolling at this point, and keeping Russia happy is a very big part of that.
Right. And Italy can't be mad at the fleet. I mean, you've got to build something. He wouldn't have wanted an army. This was probably better for him.
Yep, for sure. I also had considerable input in the Italian build. You'll notice in the last move he took off his retreating unit instead of retreating it, which was due to me asking him to do that. And then he rebuilt it as an army because I was saying, okay, if you rebuild it as an army, we've got a better attack path on Austria, but obviously my actual reasoning was I don't want Italian fleets here. I just want to be able to walk into the Italian peninsula once I get there.
And the logic used was, look, you're in Serbia. If you build an army, we can take out Austria.
Yeah, precisely. His move to Tuscany in the last phase had been a good move, I think, just in case of that convoy over, the French convoy. But the fact that it didn't bounce left him in a really bad position against Austria, and he needed to rebuild in Venice to keep that to be able to move against Austria again.
But meanwhile, whatever you're telling Italy, there's no doubt at this point you're working with Russia.
Yep. Yeah. Russia was my number one ally here, and I was planning to go the distance with them.
Now, I think Superstition told me, playing England, that you were one of the reasons he built a fleet in Liverpool. Do you remember that?
I was not. I believe that was Italy and Russia.
Italy, okay.
Italy
Russia
certainly.
for sure. Okay, yeah.
Like Italy was just talking non-stop about wanting England to get France, to attack France, and he was really happy with that English build. He said that it was his doing, and I'm pretty sure it was. I'm pretty sure that was due to his negotiation. So huge props to him on that.
Well, by the way, we will start a new Diplomat Special Edition drinking game. Every time you say Italy sent a lot of press, you must take a drink. It comes up continuously in all of these podcasts. Okay, so
I'm not sure I'll make it to the end of the podcast if we do that.
So you twist the knife in Italy here, brother. Yep. This was clearly not expected from Italy's standpoint, but you did what you needed to do.
Yeah. So he wanted me to attack Russia. He was also trying to sweet talk Russia into attacking me. Obviously, me and Russia had both cross-referenced that, realized, hey, Italy's going to side with one of us against the other, but we don't know which, so we might as well just stick together because we know we'll both stick with each other. So I knock him out of Serbia.
True, but you also have better position, the two.
Yeah, better position as well. That was absolutely important. But
was this agreed with Russia to no longer bounce in the black?
Yeah. The important thing here was him covering Romania so that Serbia couldn't retreat there. And in order for that to happen, I had to at least not move Ankara. Figured I might as well move it to Constantinople, make Russia a bit happier there.
Were you tad worried at that time with the build Russia made in Moscow?
Not really. It was a weird build.
Concerned up north, yeah. So,
yeah, I felt like it was a cautious build against England. It didn't seem like something against me to me, because obviously I could just trap that unit in Moscow if it tried coming south by bouncing Sevastopol over and over.
So here, though, is where you missed the army. if you had built an army as opposed to the fleet in Smyrna.
Oh yes. Well, I mean, we'll get to that on the fall phase, right?
Here we go. I mean, this was. Now, have you listened to Max Bax, who played Russia? Have you listened to his podcast?
Yes.
The podcast. Okay, so you heard his explanation that he knew you were going to the black because you had asked for a bounce. He was worried that you were getting to 6. He felt he had no other option. Although in retrospect, he's mad he didn't take Vienna. Tell us what went down from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what there was to it. We arranged a bounce in the Black Sea. At this point, I was on pretty good terms with Austria because the first time I'd attacked them, I basically just said, I'm attacking you. So, I don't think we particularly need to talk, but I just want to keep comms open. And, if there's any way we can work together in future, I'd be happy to. And actually, on the previous phase, I had sent him a tip-off as to what the Russian was doing. And that was why he probably would have self-bounced Budapest anyway, but he cut the Russian support and stopped Russia getting into Vienna on the previous phase here. So we'd already built up a bit of a rapport. So Austria actually messaged me telling me about this Russian offer to support him to Serbia. Looking back at it, I'm really, really, really annoyed that I didn't take that as a reason to self-bounce in Bulgaria. But I was absolutely convinced that Russia wouldn't want me in the Black Sea. And that if a Russian
you normally don't cede that territory. Or the North Sea.
The Black Sea, sorry.
No, either sea. But I mean, you don't usually cede the Black Sea or the North Sea. Is my point.
Right, yeah,
it's a very valuable piece of real estate.
Absolutely. I figured we've arranged a bounce there. If he goes to Bulgaria with the fleet, he's stabbing for one center, and he's letting me into the Black Sea at the same time. That seems like a huge blunder to me. Obviously, he did it anyway. I really should have self-bounced here because Austria wouldn't have told me he was going to Serbia if he was actually going to Serbia, so there was no reason for me to support hold that unit, but something possessed me to support hold it, and yeah, painful.
Yeah, painful. Fortuitously, though, you moved to the Aegean.
Yes.
So, so it could have been even worse if you had done something else with that fleet.
Yeah, I think I initially had Eastern Mediterranean set to go to the Ionian, and I changed it after Austria's message to me, just as a slight precaution, because obviously it probably wouldn't get into Ionian anyway. That ended up being a huge advantage for me in this war, having that fleet there.
Correct. You may have noticed that I was very clear with Max, because he tried to obscure it a little bit, and I'm like, so you lied to Turkey, right? It was a lie. He's like, yes, it was a lie. So you got lied to first. You have the advantage. Not that you've never lied in diplomacy, but clearly that was an out-and-out lie.
Yeah, it was, to be fair, he very rarely lied over the course of the game. But yeah, this was one time when he did, and I didn't really care about the lie. I mean, I'm that's not something I particularly mind as a player. I know people are gonna lie, but I did play up that I cared about that lie basically every time he tried to make a deal after that, saying, "Oh, you lied to me this time. How could I trust you? I want more on my side of the deal." And that worked to some extent at some points.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, and it didn't help him with Italy either, because Italy could have had Trieste. So Russia has damaged a lot of credibility for Bulgaria.
Italy wouldn't have picked up Trieste here because I entered Serbia supports Trieste hold.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that was basically just in return for the Austrian giving me information, and I figured I don't particularly want a big Italian here. I'm gonna stop him from getting that.
Okay. Well, I don't know why I never noticed that, but okay. Russia, Vilds, and Sevastopol, as we've learned how to pronounce it correctly. And you don't have any disbands at this point because you picked up Serbia. I'm thinking that's right, or am I missing something?
No, that's correct. I didn't lose any units. I didn't gain any units. I should say, like, getting Russia to build Army Sevastopol was probably one of my best negotiating moments in the game. It took a lot of work for that to happen, and it basically, on Backstabber, you get an extra, like, 10 minutes after the end of the phase where it's still adjudicating.
Correct. You do.
He changed his orders in that 10 minutes to this. It was initially a fleet there, so yeah,
Well,
it's very close to being a really
how
bad
are you able
situation.
to do that? I mean, he's declared war on you, and what is your pitch to him to stop?
I think it was just like, as long as you build an army in Sevastopol, I at least have reason to try and work with you going forward where I can. If you build a fleet here, I know with 100% at war, I'm just gonna throw everything I have at you, and we'll see how it plays out. But otherwise, you've got diplomatic options. I think to some extent it was just me being open to the idea of working together still, that had that effect on him. He saw that, I'm someone who doesn't think that one stab ends everything.
Clearly not. So that's why he went for a second later on.
Yep.
But I mean, look, if he had built the fleet, he's very vulnerable at that point. I mean, yes, he can take the Black Sea, he can force it, but he's got a lot of issues apart from that. So I can understand why he may have built the army there.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly better if you have the potential of working with Turkey and not being forced to work against them. But it's just the fleet is still very good if you're committing to an anti-Turkish war. Pushing Bulgaria into the Black Sea instead of having it forced disbanded would have been a huge advantage for him here, and one he didn't get.
Yeah, no, that would have been. You're 100% correct. I hadn't thought about it, but here you do get to consolidate your position quite a bit.
Yep, I do. That was also obviously a big part of that was me still being willing to work with him and say, okay, we can still work together. I'll let you have Serbia. I'm going to pull back my units in Serbia to Bulgaria. The idea was that his fleet would go through Constantinople and into Aegean, but I was never going to let that happen.
Yeah.
So, but agreeing to that at least prevented Sevastopol to Armenia from being a possibility, and that was big in keeping me safe.
Well, you also get it back together with Italy a bit. Italy needs you, and you need Italy here in the Ionian.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This was kind of when we started working together a bit more. I guess we both maybe he saw me as an underdog here or something, because like this was the point in the game where he started saying, I want you to win, and I'm not sure I believed it for a very long time. But eventually it turned out to be true, so I don't know at what point that became real to him, but it started here.
He was really going to sell you a good car.
Indeed.
All right. So, this is not bad for you either. With Russia now having to be occupied north, you consolidate your position. You're essentially still not threatening to anybody, but in a reasonable spot. The fleet issue's a little out. What can you do? You have to make sure that Bulgaria can't retreat to Constantinople. You had no other option.
Yep. Fleet Constantinople isn't great, but hey, I had to put it there.
All right. Well, here we go to fall 1904. Now you're pressing your advantage. This is a bad year for Russia in the south. I don't know which one to go with first. Let's start with this. How did you sucker Italy to falling for the Serbia gambit again?
It wasn't really falling for the Serbia gambit here. I feel like it was the
Did he
right
suggest
play
it
on his
again?
part. I can't actually remember which of us suggested it, but it was the right play because that Vienna army was not going to Budapest until like again into the adjudication time. I think he changed that order, so otherwise Italy probably wasn't going to get anything. He was supposed to get a build here, and then that stupid shuffle happened.
That is,
over the IO.
imagine the coincidences of that, right? That's like flipping a coin 4 times to get that result.
Yep. I thought that the likely move was going to be something like Tyrrhenian. Well, if we were going to lose this coin flip on Naples and Rome, the likely move would have been Tyrrhenian Sea to Naples and Tunis to Tyrrhenian Sea. So I went there to bounce, and obviously just the positions got completely flipped over. It was extremely annoying at the time. Over in the Balkans, though, as well, I was not expecting to get Romania at all here. I flipped Bulgaria from supporting Albania to Serbia to supporting Black Sea to Romania pretty last minute, just because I realized there's no point in supporting it to Serbia. It's already got enough. But it just happened to counter the Russian moves perfectly, despite me knowing nothing about them.
Yeah, no, that is a very good result for you. Fall 1904 is the beginning of the, I'll call it the beginning of the first comeback for you.
Yeah.
You struggled a lot, and I tell you what, I mean, one of the things that Max back said is you're never out of it. He was talking about Russia, but in many ways he could have been talking about you. I mean, the finals, it's hard to understand, Captain Meme, from the outside, like you were 2 years ago with me.
Yeah.
The grind this is, and that hanging around is a lot of its own merit sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a way my whole up down sort of play is a result of me playing a hell of a lot better when I'm doing badly. Like the moment I start doing badly, I start putting more effort in and trying to climb my way back up to the top and just basically doing everything I can. And then I get to a good position and I start making mistakes again. And that's just keeps on happening.
Well, there's something to be said. When you're backed into a corner, your options are limited. So, you can concentrate on what you need to do.
Yep.
So if we go to the spring of 1905, why don't you walk us through this one?
Okay, so at this point, I'm trying to recall what exactly
Russia says it's an arranged bounce in Armenia.
Yeah. Armenia was an arranged bounce between us. There was no reason not to arrange that. Like, if I was trying to trick him and get in, he was probably just going to go there anyway, and then we'd just have lied to each other for no reason. So I tried to keep on his good side there. We knew that the Tyrolean army was there to support Austria through to Venice, so we blew up the French fleet instead of attempting to keep Venice. I think that was hugely important going forward. The big questionable move on my part.
But you were supported in. Am I missing this? You took Venice. Oh, you took Naples.
Oh yeah. I took Naples. That was part of the whole thing of Italy saying, I want you to win. I was still suspicious about that, but in my eyes, he was definitely going to do this because I'm friendly, France isn't, right? It's like trying to get the unfriendly units out of his territory, and then he could potentially negotiate with me to get his own census back.
Are
whereas
you throwing him a bone with he supports you into Albania? Are you trying to let him? Well, I guess there's really nothing you can help it. You can't get him back into Trieste at that point. At this point, Italy is really trying to help you. It seems altruistic.
Yep. Yeah. I don't think he had a ton of options here. I think he was probably still playing for himself and looking out for that opportunity where he could get back into the game, but that was definitely going to come from some kind of alliance between me and him and moving forward here because he was never going to work with Austria. So he pushed me forward. We were thinking about how to handle the next move. Arguably, I should have moved Romania to Black Sea and Bulgaria to Romania, but we had a feeling that Budapest might join Ukraine to attack that. So, oh,
Well,
I see
I
we've
gave
moved
you,
forward.
no. Did I move too much, or did I?
No, this
No,
is
this is the next move. Yeah, yeah.
this is the next move. And
This
yeah,
is the one where I told you was your worst move of the game here. I had to say it at some
yep.
point.
I
I mean,
agree.
come on. Now, Max Bax is like, this was you proposing to him. If you really want to show that we're working together, mutual holds. And he goes, agreed. And then he lied to you again.
I I mean, I might be misremembering. I'm fairly sure he was the one who was demanding that we do mutual holds, and like I was the idiot for falling for that eventually. But whichever way round it went, the reason I held Smyrna, it wasn't any kind of misorder or anything. It was because I saw this France-Germany alliance as the most dangerous thing on the board, and it wasn't something I could directly contest because obviously I'm in the back corner. If I just push out into the other nations here, I almost make France's job easier and Germany's job easier if they just stick together. Um,
Right.
so I was hanging back and sort of thinking, okay, I'll just stay here, let the other nations contest France, Germany for a bit, and try and make my push a little bit later on. And to do that, Italy, myself, Russia, and England set up a group chat talking about how we could counter the France Germany alliance. And in the north, we had this agreement that England was going to get support into, well, was going to support himself into Denmark. Russia was going to help with that, and Russia was going to get Sweden. Um, and it was pretty clear that if this wasn't going to go ahead, that England was going to throw to the other side. And in my eyes, that wasn't a deal that it ever made sense for Russia to break because, that just helps the France-Germany alliance. I thought if he's helping the France-Germany alliance, he's throwing his game away here. As we saw going forward, his stab here made a lot of sense, and I completely misjudged that. But based on my judgment that he was never going to stab in the north, I also assumed, okay, he's going to stick to all of the agreements here, and we're going to keep our coalition. And so I did the Smyrna Hold thing as a sign of goodwill, and it did not work out in the slightest.
It's difficult to conceive of a better season for Russia than this one, given
Oh, for sure.
what it
Yeah.
This is just, takes
It was
all of Scandinavia and gets position on you.
it was absolute perfection. Honestly, I'm surprised this wasn't the phase that got the Humble Award because Russia convincing England to basically give him Scandinavia here, leave himself open in this position, and him convincing me to hold in Smyrna. It was just like brilliant in terms of the negotiation. But yeah, it really worked out for him. I was really angry about it at the time, but since I've had time to think about it, and like it's fantastic.
Well, that's very big of you. I hold my grudges for long periods of time. Let's see here. Okay, so let's move to, where are we? I don't know why there you go. Spring 1906. You had a 50-50. You chose to hold. Russia gets into Ankara. You get the black, but Austria goes up another.
Yep. Um, I don't know whether my choices made a huge amount of sense here. They were based on me trusting the Austrian um, to not trust the Russian, in a sense, because I'd been basically completely honest with the Austrian for the entire game, and I knew that Russia hadn't been. So I felt that if I put Austria into a good position, and maybe he and I could work together and kick the Russian out, because my only alternative was sort of going it alone along with the Italian unit in Serbia, and that didn't really appeal to me. That seemed like it was placing too much on me winning that 50-50 in the south over and over, um, which I lost on the very first attempt. So
It's no problem. That's a Princess Bride type thing. If I do this, or you do this, so
yep.
it happens. But I'm curious. Something you said. Max, as Russia said, Austria's negotiating style, and Italy sort of talked about this as well, is I will do something if it is good for me, and seem not to understand the idea of sometimes you make a concession to get a concession. It was, how would you, is that a fair criticism of Austria or not?
Maybe. I think at this point, like he had been knocked back so far that in order to get back into the game, that was genuinely his best approach. But it did end up biting him later on when he needed an ally and no one was willing to stick with him. Up to this point, I guess I was the only person on the board who hadn't realized that was the way he was playing the game. Because my press with him had just been like I'd been at war with him this entire time, so we'd just been like casually chatting and saying, oh, this is happening and this is happening, and how are you doing today? Yada yada yada. Um, this was the first time I actually tried to work with him directly, aside from him taking Budapest off of the Russian earlier on, and yeah, I completely misjudged how much he valued being honest over just taking the advantage that he could get.
So I like the move into the Gulf of Leon, by the way.
Oh yeah, that was Italy's suggestion actually. I initially had it set to kick France out of Tunis, and Italy pointed out you don't want to do that in the spring. How's about you do it in the fall instead? And yeah, made a lot more sense.
Which is what you did.
Yep. I managed to take Tunis here, and then everywhere else it was potentially the second worst turn of the game after the previous spring.
This wasn't very good. I mean, technically you lose Romania, but you had already lost it. So I mean, yep. I don't know. That's Bulgaria gone. Serbia lost to Italy. You did get Tunis. Oh, you got Ankara back.
Yeah, but I hadn't lost Ankara, so I was still down units. Like, my plan this phase was to pull Bulgaria back and get rid of that Russian unit, obviously, and hopefully have Italy and Austria finally work together and create some sort of nice line against the Russian, with Austria moving into Galicia, or preparing to move into Galicia on the next turn. I felt like Austria would have had the units for that, but clearly he didn't really feel comfortable with being with having a strong power behind him, which is perfectly reasonable. And he decided to walk into Bulgaria instead. He also put a great deal of effort into convincing me to go to Greece, which I eventually agreed to do, which was a terrible idea to agree to do because I should have just held Serbia here. That was the obvious move, and it was the right course of action.
Yeah, that's a nice payback, unfortunately, for all the favors Italy had been doing.
Yep, absolutely. Austria really worked Italy this phase as well. Like, Italy was fully convinced that Austria was going to be on our side, because for the first time in the game, they were having some actual good dialogue that wasn't just them accusing each other of being untrustworthy. um, but yeah, it was all fake. It was all a ploy, and yeah, it worked pretty well for the Austrian and was a terrible result for me. Aside from
And he got
taking
Germany out of Tyrolia.
Yep. I mean, Germany was never going to attack Austria. Like, the German
Right.
player, he was really strong on a negotiation standpoint, at least from my perspective. I've heard that some of the other players disagree on that, but, like, from what he was saying to me, he felt like a very strong negotiating player. But he was also very set in the way he viewed the game, and one of those rules for him was Austria must do well if Germany is to do well, right?
That's
So,
actually how he ended our podcast. He goes,
oh,
I would just like to state that it's like a tenet of diplomacy that Austria and Germany must always be allied. That's how he ended it.
well, yes, he played absolutely to that. It was the reason we knew that Tyrolia was going to support Trieste Venice a year back, because like there's no other reason he would move to Tyrolia. He was always going, how about you ally with the Austrian now? How about you give the Austrian this center? How about you stop killing the Austrian? Kind of thing to me. So I knew he loved the Austrian and wanted to work with him. So yeah, Tyrolia was always going to move back to Munich once its work was done here.
In fairness, he said, I knew I needed one ally in the East, and Germany should always work with Austria, but also Austria was weakest and might appreciate me the most
Yep,
when I needed
and
it.
that's fair too. That's absolutely fair. And he was a power that Germany could actually help. So
So,
yeah,
all right, you've got to disband. The big surprise is coming soon. Nobody can miss all those round red dots in the middle of the screen.
yep, absolutely. Austria put a lot of work into trying to convince me to take Greece off here, which would have been a sensible option if I hadn't worked out a deal with Russia. Just because there was no way I was keeping Greece if I was at war with Russia, and like the Austrians' offer was basically, I'll take Greece off you and then I'll leave you alone. I won't bother with your home centers. You can try and scrounge up a win from Italy or wherever. I wasn't too happy with that, but it could have been the best offer out there if Russia hadn't given me, well, the offer you'll see in the next couple of phases.
Yeah. So now, brilliantly, you guys don't do it in the spring.
Yeah. Russia's proposal, something I absolutely agreed with, to just pretend to be having this war for the first phase and then actually attack on the full turn and surprise Austria with that.
Well, he may not have been so. I mean, he taxed you in
Yeah.
Greece. I mean, he sees the army moving, but maybe he wasn't. Well, we can let it play out, which we should.
Well, I think one thing to mention just quickly here is I
Sure.
made another huge blunder on the
Oh yeah.
Western Front.
Anytime you want to get into your blunders, let's
Yep.
let's get in. Let's get into the blunders. You
Yep.
gave up the Tyrrhenian Sea.
It wasn't giving up Tyrrhenian Sea. I think that was a smart move because it meant that on this next turn I had the chance to keep Tunis if I wanted to, and I also had the chance to protect Greece. The big blunder was not moving Tunis to North Africa because the convoy was pretty obviously going to happen, and
And he had done it before.
Yep. I just didn't think of that, and obviously Tunis support Tyrrhenian to Ionian is a completely useless move because Italy was never going to move there. So
Yeah, well, that's a good point. That is
yeah,
a good point.
um,
And that would have put you in a. Well, you still can keep Tunis in the fall, but it certainly hurts.
yeah. I mean, in
I
order
don't think
to,
that's a huge blunder. It's a minor blunder.
it was my biggest blunder for over for the next 2 years, I think.
Yeah, well, the support and fall of 1909 we can talk about as to whether that was a blunder or not. All right. But look, you had a good fall 1907. You got the band back together again.
This was beautiful. I loved it so much, that convoy. I don't know whether it was actually in Russia's best interest to work with me. I think it was, just because he's not going to win if the Austrian is that strong, because Austria was clearly going to come after him after he'd taken Greece.
Well, you heard what Max said. He said, at this point, you were reasonable and reliable. He had stabbed you twice, and you were still talking to him. Russia, Austria, he couldn't work with.
Yep. I mean, yeah, I'm always open to alliances even after someone stabs me, so that makes me quite a good player to align with sometimes, especially if you've stabbed me before. You still have the opportunity to turn around, and he did. So very happy about that.
Must have been nice to stick it to Austria also. He still couldn't get Greece. You can tell he thought for sure that was going to happen. You sacrificed Tunis for it, but man, what a way.
Yep. I mean, I think the Tunis sacrifice was worth it here because keeping France out of the Turanian was still quite good. But yeah, the Austrian was taken pretty much by surprise by this move, I think, even though I kind of hinted towards having a deal with Russia just to make sure that I was still being honest with Austria, because I wanted him to have the impression that I'd just been honest with him all game, because that will make him more likely to throw to me in the end. So, but yeah, he didn't think Russia would actually do it, and Russia did it. So
this is something that Bobo talked about, but no one else has other than you, which is there's really the awareness that the game ends in 1910, that the end might involve the throwing of centers, and gaining enough support from someone to throw centers to you was the game within the game within the game.
Yep. Yeah, that's parts of the game I feel like I'm quite good at. I play a lot of online Survivor, the reality show, the American one that we don't really see here, but that I find quite interesting. And in that game, when you get to the end, you have to have convinced people that you're worthy of the win. So I'm pretty used to doing that. And you can see it really paid off for me here, because in the last turn, well, I mean, we'll get to that, but I had a few people in my corner in terms of wanting me to win the game. And that was what let me do some things.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I mentioned this one time to Umble about Survivor, and he was like, no, I don't watch reality TV. There are a lot of parallels between diplomacy and Survivor. Somebody should write an article about
it. I feel like Survivor is actually the much harder game, just because it's
you're not eating.
Okay. Even if you take off all the actual surviving parts, just the vote out, because one mistake takes you out of Survivor, whereas you can come back from a position like this in diplomacy. If I if I'm off my game for one phase in Survivor, suddenly I'm home and there's nothing I can do about it. So yeah.
So it has a diplomacy point, but the end of season 1 of the American Survivor, I don't know if they have a UK version, there was a challenge between 3 people, and there was a final 2 in those days. Now it's a final 3. And Richard Hatch, the eventual winner, he stopped playing the challenge in the middle, because he goes, both of you are going to take me because I'm hated by everybody else. It's to your advantage to take me. And that move helped him win the game just by recognizing that spot. Of course, he was taken to the finals, and he won.
Yeah, I think that move actually gave him his winning vote, right? Because if he had won that challenge, he would have had to be the person to vote out Rudy, who was the other person in the final 3. And if he was the person who voted out Rudy, then Rudy probably wouldn't have voted for him at the end. So it
We
was
we have
absolutely
common
genius
interest.
play on his part.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So that was, but yeah, there are a lot of parallels. And here, you did great. You kept France out of Trinity Sea. You got Bulgaria back. It's just a matter of, at this point, how many centers can you scoop up, and can you get back in this game? I'm sure that you are obsessed with that at this point.
absolutely. Yeah, I was just eyes on the prize. I want to win this game still, and I'm just going to do everything I can to get back into a position where I can hopefully win it.
All right. So 1908 takes
Yep.
through it. You're in
Okay.
Romania. You help Russia into Serbia.
Yep. Everything here was arranged. I at this point I'm thinking, okay, I want to run with Russia, maybe side with Austria after I pushed Russia a bit of a way forward. But the main thing in my eyes was just make sure that Russia was sandwiched between myself and Austria, so that if there's any kind of alliance going forward, it's either me pushing Russia forward or it's me and Austria working together. Russia didn't have any options. So I think that was successful here. Convoying up to Romania was interesting. It was the Russian suggestion, if I recall correctly.
I'd
And
be a little worried about Constantinople, given that Russia has a proclivity to stab for one, but I guess you could have covered it, and
I
Sevastopol
mean,
was.
if he had stabbed for Constantinople here, as in this very phase, he wouldn't have taken Serbia, so the convoy wouldn't have gone, and he wouldn't have gotten into
No, but
Constantinople
in
that
the
way.
fall, in the fall.
Yeah, in the fall, maybe he thought so. I don't know if there's anything more we want to talk about here. Probably not. There's not a lot
Uh,
interesting going on.
yeah.
But if we move
Here
forward to
we
the
go.
fall,
Someone did stab for one.
yep. So basically, the story here was Russia opens up the phase by telling me, okay, we're working together against Austria. I don't care what you do. You can take Sevastopol if you want, as long as you help me against Austria, we're good. I'm like, oh, okay, sure, I'll take Sevastopol then. I didn't tell him I'd take Sevastopol. I said, okay, I'll go to Constantinople because he wanted me to go to Constantinople, and him thinking that I was going to go to Con obviously stopped any possibility of Bulgaria to Con. Um, but yeah, I always had the Black to Seb move set. I was like, I'm taking the builds here. Thanks, Russia.
So, I think it's still 1908 where Humble, I can't remember, and I'm too mentally challenged, where Humble said you should have taken three. That's not here.
No,
I
that
think it's
was
09.
1909.
That's
Yeah.
what I thought. All right. So, well, you got two. Maybe it was 08.
Um.
I think he was saying you could take Bulgaria.
Oh. If I was taking Bulgaria here, I would have had to not take Sevastopol. Um.
Yeah.
Because I have to cover Constantinople, so I think it still ends up being two.
Same. All right. Well, in any event, here you are going now into the spring 1909. Hey, brother, this has got to be it. You're back in it, okay? You've got Bulgaria, you got Serbia, and uh, it's looking good.
Yep. Looking even better given France accidentally missed the phase and disbanded Tyrrhenian Sea instead of retreating it. But anyway, on the Balkan front, I feel like this was arranged. It might not have entirely been, but it was certainly it was certainly good for a Turkish-Russian alliance having this having our units untangled here. Him moving everything back towards Sevastopol definitely wasn't arranged, but
Yeah, no, clearly he sees an area for growth, getting back one of his home centers.
yeah, I was hopeful that the German unit on Cilicia would stop an attack on Sevastopol from a proper attack on Sevastopol from happening, because obviously he has to leave Warsaw completely undefended. And also, I realize I've been pronouncing Sevastopol wrong this entire time, but I'm just going to keep doing that. I mean, this phase, there's not a huge amount to talk about. The Austrian was annoyed at me for not stabbing the Russian, and he continues to get a little bit more annoyed at me, even though I'm still being quite honest with him in accordance with my strategy of trying to get him to throw. And him supporting the French unit into Rome was directly against me. He was saying, well, you didn't attack Russia, well, screw you, I'm going to help France here. Which was painful, but I'm not sure what I could have done to avoid that, aside from stab Russia, and I'm not sure stabbing Russia was the right move, at least this early on.
So, hilariously, Germany says he didn't take Warsaw either in this move or the next one because he didn't think Russia could do as well as he ended up doing, and that Russia might throw to him.
Yep. Yeah. It was pretty clear that both myself and Germany were working with Russia, specifically with the intention of hopefully Russia being a little bit weaker than they actually turned out to be. Because if Russia
was the move that broke Germany's heart. Fall 1909. He realized at this point that Russia would not be throwing to anybody at this point.
Yeah. And like from that perspective, I know I kind of agree with Umble's assessment that I should have gone it alone here and stopped supporting the Russian intercenters, especially Trieste, on this move. But I feel like if I had backstabbed Russia here, he would likely have thrown to Germany. And like I always had that impression. And if he did end up throwing to Germany, then I've just screwed my game over by stabbing him. And I'm not playing for second place. I'm playing for first place with this.
Well, it's a difficult needle to thread, no matter which way you look at it. You're way behind, bro. You got to get centers.
Absolutely, yeah. But there's no. I was losing every tiebreaker, right? There's no point in me getting centers if I'm just going to be stuck at 7 or 8 here, and Germany's going to get a whole bunch more in the north. At least that was my way of looking at it at the time. Maybe stabbing Russia could have worked, but I think this was about as good a path to the end as stabbing Russia would have been. The best changed move would have just been to not enter Serbia, support Albania to Trieste, and to let Russia do everything else, because then I could have possibly claimed, okay, I'm still helping you, but I'm not helping you so much that you beat me, and he might have respected that.
He might have. You never know.
But yeah, difficult to judge. This annoyed the Austrian again, but going forward, I'd still built up enough of a relation with him enough goodwill with him from constantly being honest that he did still want to at least help me against the Russian in the last turn.
So let's see. Let's go to the spring, and this is where everybody's scrambling for position here.
Yep.
I think it's best. You can talk about the moves, which are, I guess, somewhat interesting, but you do sort of make a move for Budapest, which you and Russia have turned. Obviously, Sevastopol's gone from before. Everyone's just trying to get as many centers as they can.
Yep. Well, everyone except Germany, it seems. Germany made a huge blunder here by trusting France, and France backstabbed him on whatever deal they had. I don't know what deal they had, but it burned Germany enough that he wanted anyone but France to win going into the end game, into the last phase. But But it also gave France enough of an advantage that he was guaranteed 9 here because he could take London and he could protect Belgium and he could guarantee Naples. So that was a huge problem for me because my plan up to this point had been have everyone else hopefully on 8 and then somehow get to 9. But this meant I had to get to 10.
So, again, Italy says that you and he came up with the same plan, but I will say you were so quick at the end of the game to discuss what happened that not saying I disbelieve Italy because I'm sorry, Germany. Germany was saying this. And Germany's such a nice guy, I would never accuse him of lying. But did you develop this idea on your own of trying to get to 10?
I would say so. I mean, I'd need to check over the press again to see if Germany sends anything. I don't remember Germany suggesting anything to do with me getting to 10 centers. I know Italy definitely did, and Italy was a huge part in my strategy here because it was completely his idea to blow up at Russia and say, I'm giving the extra center to France, which caused Russia to think he needed 11.
Right, which caused him to think he had to take Romania.
Yeah, that was like absolutely key to everything I did this phase. So massive props to Italy on that. He was a little bit unhelpful through the rest of the game with how much he tried to make me win because he would occasionally just message Austria and Russia and like stick us all in a group chat and say, I think Turkey should be champion of the South. How about you all throw to him? It's just like, no, stop it, Italy. I'm dealing with these guys. You don't need to say this. You're just making them less likely to like me. Because it makes it look like I'm working more closely with you and they all dislike you. But this move, he was absolutely key in me even having a chance at all. And that was huge. And then past that point...
Germany says, and let me just, because it's directly on point. Germany said that he basically discussed with you that, look, he could take Sweden. Or he could attack Sweden. He could convince Russia otherwise. He was going to attack Sweden, and he saw the same move. He just wanted your support, into Trieste, and you would not give it to him under any circumstances. He thought he could get Austria to help him into Trieste, and that he said that you guys pressed for a very long time. Is this a recollection of yours fighting over Trieste?
Yeah, kind of. So yeah, I do actually remember what he's talking about here with the us coming up with the same idea. I came up with the same idea of him attacking Sweden and him attacking Trieste at the same time as he did, because we were discussing it, and he was like, "Oh, I was thinking of a way I could win," and I'm like, "How could he do that?" Oh, he tricks Russia into thinking he needs more centers and then takes Sweden. And then he pitched it to me after I said that's probably what you should go for. But and I always appeared open to it because I wanted to keep German goodwill. I knew at this point I needed Germany to tap Vienna in order for me to win this game. And if I just shut down his solo attempt and say, no, screw you, I'm not supporting you to Trieste, he's probably not going to respond to that by going, oh, okay, you can win the game instead then.
What a hard position to be in.
Yeah, so I ended up making a deal with him, or at least it felt like a deal to me, that it was complicated, but he thought that Russia would go to Venice with his support, or would want to go to Venice with his support. And if that happened, then Russia would definitely be on 10 supply centers by the end of the game, and so Germany would have no reason to, I would have no way to win. So the deal we came to was that if Russia was insistent on that, I would help Germany win. And if Russia wasn't insistent on that or backed down on it at any point, then Germany would help me win, or at least I felt like that was what we agreed. Germany felt a little bit differently. I think he felt that I agreed to support him in if Russia was doing that, and the opposite, he would just decide whether to help me win or not, which was what ended up being my downfall. But then I went to Russia and I basically said, okay, I'm willing to throw you the game as long as it doesn't look like I'm throwing you the game, because I don't want to damage my reputation. And then I said, okay, I'm attacking Trieste as part of this whole not looking like I'm throwing the game. And that obviously meant Russia would never move to Venice. So I won the deal with the German. And then the German backed out of it. So I didn't quite get there. But I felt like I had everything set up. It was just down to whether the German honored that or not. And he decided that if he helped me, France had a better chance to win than if he helped Russia. He turned out to be wrong.
Correct. By not helping you, he ended up helping the person he definitely did not want to win.
Yeah. So interestingly, again, Backstabber has this time where it's adjudicating, where you can still negotiate and still change your orders. I found throughout the game it lasts somewhere between 7 and 15 minutes, but you could never be sure on exactly how long. So me and Germany were negotiating about this right the way up to the time when moves went through. So when I probably would have gone for these moves anyway, even if I knew they weren't going to work, because I want to at least make an effort to win. But I never really had a chance to know that Germany definitely wasn't going to do this, because the moves went through while we were still negotiating.
So it was as much as a surprise as anyone else when you saw what happened.
Yeah, yes or no. I knew Germany wasn't cutting Vienna after his last message, but I didn't know the moves were going to go through right then and there, so I thought I still had a little more time to convince him.
Gotcha.
I think if Germany had had more time, he probably would have just tipped off Russia to go to Budapest, which would have made a ton more sense here. But we'll never know.
Is France a winner?
Sorry?
Is France a worthy champion?
Yes, because he won the game. He played in a way that I don't think would have won him most finals, but it didn't have to win him most finals. It had to win him this one, and he correctly judged the German player. He correctly realized that was a player who would stick with him all game. He correctly judged when to stab, even though his stab wasn't the most effective. And more importantly, perhaps the play of the game for France was convincing Germany in spring 1910 to move in a way such that France could guarantee keeping Belgium. And off of that move, he won the game. So it depends on your definition of worthy. I don't think his press was very good, especially with me. I had about 4 years of me just saying, please respond, and him sending me nothing. But he played
Superstition said that Pez's press was sort of like, I'm doing this. There's really not a debate. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I guess he didn't send me much because he didn't really have anything to tell me that he was doing, because all of the things he was doing on my front were just against me. So
Pez, I think you're a worthy winner. You won the game. Okay, the results speak for themselves. I think it was a fantastically entertaining game. Is there anything else you'd like to say about it before we start to wrap up?
It was
biggest regret.
Biggest regret is holding Spanner in fall 1905.
All right.
That was what spelled the point in my game where I couldn't win it normally anymore. I had to play this scrappy game from the bottom where I had to convince all sorts of people to support me to win and go for this elaborate scheme that didn't work. Yeah. So that's pretty clearly my biggest regret. I think it was a fantastic game though. Like the quality of every player in this game was amazing, even if negotiation varied a little bit. Everyone played extremely well throughout, even when they made blunders and such, and everyone was absolutely fantastic to play with.
Well, it looks like a game that would have been fun to play in. It was certainly entertaining to those of us who watched and commented. I thank you for playing. It's really a pleasure getting to talk to you in person. And thanks to diplomacybriefing.com for sponsoring our podcast. Thanks to Umble for not appearing on the podcast because you would have made it even longer than it was. And Captain Meme, thanks for everything. Good night to you, sir. I know
very
it's very
quickly
late
first,
where you're at.
Thanks to you for sitting through a 1.5 hour podcast after just doing an apparent 2.5 hour podcast with Babu. And thanks for all your commentary through the game. It really it was really interesting to listen to it all the way through and to finally be the person in that position of being commentated about.
Not so easy, is it?
No, it isn't. It definitely isn't.
All right. Have a good night. Thank you so much, Captain Meme.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.